Welcome to the Liberation Lab podcast, insights and interviews for the disruptive educator. I'm honored to have my two guests. So why don't you tell the people who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
Yeah. So I'm Jasmine Jarvis. I'm one of two co-founders of Mix in America, which is an organization that is focused on facilitating safe spaces and providing resources for multiracial people. And why I do it is because that is a necessary conversation, and those resources have not been created and definitely weren't created when I was growing up. So that's what drives Mix in America.
Amen. My name is Meagan Smith. I'm the other co-founder of Mixed in America. Mixed in America is really about creating safe, supportive spaces for multiracial people, for prioritizing, I think, the conversations around what it means to, have multiple cultures and experiences running through one body. Why I do it, I really believe that Jazz and I have tried to create what we so wished that we had growing up. And our community is thirsty for support, is thirsty for space, and is really it's a beautiful, for in our experience at least, group of people who have such empathy because they understand more than one experience.
Yeah.
And I want to give back to a community that I think gives so much.
I think about this. So I put all my cards on the table for those who are listening. And that is, when I wanted to invite you both on, my whole thought was these conversations aren't happening in schools. So I am an assistant principal at a school, and we tend to see people one way. It is one-way traffic continuously. You are Black. You are, you are Puerto Rican. You are Guatemalan, and that is all we see. And so,
Mm-hmm.
when you talk about both of you having multiple experiences in one body, it is almost like in our world and in our schools being a microcosm of that, you only have permission to present one side of you.
Yep.
And so our teachers are understanding only part of your experience, I would feel like. And so that kind of brings me to, I want to reach back, if you will, to little Meagan, little Jasmine in school, and that experience. What was that like for you, knowing what you know now in terms of identity and belonging in your school experience?
Yeah. Such a great question, and so much really to unpack there. I mean, the school, is just another system that I think was created with a lot of binary. It's really focused on the binary, and it's both focused on structure and boxes and categorization, and mixed people fall in multiple boxes. And so it really does start early on. Like one of my first experiences of realizing that I was different and there's something off and I need to adjust was filling out like standardized testing forms when you could only select one box. There was a time, and still there's some forms that are like that, where you could only select one. And, I just remember having this feeling of like, it's one of the first questions before you even begin the test, and I'm stumped. Everyone else is like racing through the test, has, figured out all the basic informational stuff, and is like taking the test. And I'm like having this little existential crisis as a, however you're old, like 7-year-old, being like, wait, check one? What do you mean? And it was one of those moments of like, oh, like I'm different. Like if this is like the test, this is a standardized test. That means that the standard is that you can check one, and I can't check one, so I'm not the standard. So I think that that conditioning starts so early of me being like, I'm different, my family's different, my perspective's different, and I need to figure out and how to adjust myself in order to fit the system, because, as a kid, all we really want is acceptance. We want love. We want to be claimed. We want to be a part of community. And so it's a lot of navigating and being like, who do I need to become? Which box do I need to select and check so that way I can have community and I can be claimed, and so I think the result of that is then hiding a portion of yourself or code switching, depending on who you're with because of that desire just to be claimed and a part of community. And so you kind of just begin to adjust to those systems and to that binary, and it starts very young.
Wow.
It really does. It's so true. I have a very similar memory of like when it all kind of started to explode on top of me. And, it can feel like just the simple deciding which box to choose for a child. At least for me, it felt like, okay, well, which parent me is more relevant to my identity? Who do I choose? Who's more important? And then it's like, well, do I pick based on who I look like more? Because I have so many features of my mother, when people look at me and my mom, we look so similar, but I, have lighter skin like my father. So like, how do you just, and it's like, oh God. And then a child's mind trying to reckon with that. For me, I remember one of the real big moments of like, oh, wow, like I've got something different going on was when I think I must have been in second grade, maybe first grade. And a friend had told me, Jazmine's heard the story, but a friend had told me that I was adopted. And she was, because she saw my mom and I, and she was like, well, that's not your mom. And I was like, yes, it is. And I was like, I'm not adopted. And she was like, no, you are adopted. And she was so certain that it made me question what I knew to be true. And so I raced home like furious at my mother and so like worked up thinking that my family had lied to me. And then my mom, was like, that's not true. Now we have to have a larger conversation about features. And so my mom, we both stood in the mirror and she pointed out these parts of me that were like her because I needed something to grab onto because it was the beginning of a much longer and more complex journey of, the beginning of people telling me what I'm not, or telling me what parts of myself I can claim. And of course, that little girl was just being a little girl and hadn't, had enough examples, I think, herself and in her own household of diversity and shades of people. But that really was a launching place for what would then continue to be a confusing journey of just trying to find my footing. Like that's how it felt, like trying to find the way to fit in, trying to find the path of least resistance, and that it was like every day it's a new thing. It's like, whether it's, oh, I want the Black kids to like really like rock with me, or I want the white kids to be very real with you. And Jazz and I went to the same schools for elementary, middle, and high school. That was the time. It's boy bands, white boys, blonde hair, the straight hair, like for the girls, like Britney Spears. Like that was a time where it was like, I didn't even understand at the time that I was striving for whiteness because that was what was taught to me. Yeah. It's like in everything I was taking in. And so I look back now and I see myself as a child knowing somewhere in me that I should strive to be like the white kids, but always wanting acceptance from the Black kids too. So I really tried it all and did my best.
A fraction of what you shared in terms of feeling like when I was checking the box of, Black African American, and then they had the second box that let you select Hispanic was almost like paradigm shifting for me because my family's from Panama. But if you were to just look at me, you would assume oh, I'm just a black guy, right? Like that's just it. So it's this weird. I won't say weird, but it was weird in the sense of not what I experienced externally from people. When I came home, my grandma spoke with an accent. She spoke Spanish to me all the time.
Mm,
That was my experience when I came through the door. When I left
Mm.
out, my grandma was like, "Vaya con Dios," like that was
Yeah.
my experience. When I got into the world, though, and I was in school, I presented as and therefore was accepted as
Mm.
just a black man in these yet to be United States. And again, this is me just trying to get a glimpse of what you both talk about. And so, from the teachers you experienced, was there a sense of acceptance, belonging, misunderstanding? What was it like from the adults as you traverse through K to 12?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And honestly, question I haven't really thought about it. I've really done a lot of digging on my experience with my peers,
Yeah.
because that was who I felt really affected by, because kids will say whatever.
Right.
and,
And that,
and
that was
adults
actually my
know,
second question.
yeah,
Yeah.
adults know better than to just say what comes to their mind versus
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
So I think it was less of that direct things and more of the subtleties. And
Hmm.
also it was just a feeling of never feeling seen, basically, with adults. It was like, I'm not sure how I'm going to be seen. So like that already creates a level of like a lot of our work in Mixed in America is around creating safety in your body as a mixed person, because there were so many moments where you just feel unsafe because you're not sure how someone's going to perceive you. I
Yeah.
think too with colorism as a thing as well. It's like if it was a black adult, they might have some underlying anger towards me that I didn't understand because I'm a little mixed girl, and it was like a whole thing that like white supremacy has kind of created a divide even within our own communities and
Yes.
between colorism and mixed people and monoracial people of color. And so you'll feel that even with adults because maybe they're not saying it, but you're like, I'm not sure how I'm going to perceive in this moment. Do they have trigger points around mixed people and mixedness and someone who's black and white? And so I think, and then with white people, it was like fetishization and really
Mm.
weird, like, let me touch your hair. Wow, you're so pretty to a kid, and saying things that are like, you should not be complimenting a kid in this way. And so it's a very strange experience, I think, with adults. I never felt really safe, I guess. It was like always an energy of
Mm.
I'm not sure how I'm going to be perceived. I'm not sure how to going to be able to navigate this situation. And and it's really interesting. I think as mixed people, we can kind of get a lot of people's projections. Like they see in us what they want to see in us. So if they're
Mm.
wanting to project something into us, we're like the perfect canvas almost for that because of our ambiguity. And I have a memory that just kind of came through of like I remember this teacher. We were at recess um, and I had like spilt ice cream on the floor, and she like raced over to me and like yelled at me so aggressively and was like, "Don't litter," and went off. And I remember thinking like, "Whoa, like you saw that I was doing something like intentionally." Like it was like this white teacher, right? Like was like, "Oh, you're definitely like creating a mess and doing things on purpose." And I remember as a kid, like it stuck with me because I remember being like, "Whoa, like I had never seen you yell at any other kid like that." You know what I mean? And so
Mm.
it's kind of like those moments of like I never knew what to expect, I guess, with the adults because they weren't curious about my experience. They just already had the assumption of who I was, what background I had. And having interracial parents too, it's changed a lot now,
Mm.
interracial couples, but I'd even say like even during the time of us growing up, it was still kind of a thing. Like there's a lot of assumptions. Oh, black man, white woman. There's a whole set of assumptions that come with that. So there's a set of
Yep.
assumptions for like what my environment was growing up and that
Yeah.
situation. So I definitely think that played a role in my relationship with the authority figures.
Mm. It's
ooh,
heavy.
the adultification of kids of color is
Yeah.
Heavy.
huge.
Yeah.
And there were not a ton of kids of color in
Mm-mm.
our elementary school. So, yeah.
Mm.
Um, the thing that was coming to mind for me was just, I think, similar to what Jazz is saying, just so much lack, so much like so much conversation that's missing. And so when things would happen, when a racial situation might occur, there was just no tools, no language, no anything, no way. It just felt like the kids dealing with it in the cafeteria or in the playground on their own. The one interaction I do remember that really did, that I think is so bizarre with a teacher, was I was in fourth grade. And so my mom is my mom's Black, my dad's white, and my mom is a beautician, and a really gifted one at that. So, and I'm very blessed that I had a mother who was so good with my hair and knew what to do, and really, really just like uplifted me with my hair journey. But my mom had put some product in my hair. I don't remember the full situation, but a teacher had pulled me aside, and I really liked this teacher too, a white woman. And I was so scared because she was like, Megan, I need to talk I'm going to like talk to you before recess or whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm terrified. And she pulled me aside and she was like, is everything okay at home? And
Okay.
I was like, yeah. And she was like, are you eating? Like, do you have everything? Like, are you showering? Like, what is all going on? And I was just so confused, but because it was like my teacher, and I am a person who struggles with people pleasing and like authority figures in
Yeah.
general. So as a child, I was really like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to tell her whatever because I'm so scared. And I feel like I did something wrong. Why is she asking me about my hygiene? Why is she asking me about, and then it got to my more specific to my hair. She was like, I'm just noticing your hair looks a little oily, like, are you I want to make sure you're bathing. I want to make sure you're eating. And I was like, no, my mom put product in my hair. Like, this is product, and I tried to, even my young mind then, I remember a light bulb, and I was like, oh yeah, this white lady doesn't understand Black girls' hair. And so I didn't even think like, oh, how terrible that she just put me through all this, and like, why would she jump to all these neglect assumptions?
Yeah.
I was thinking, oh, she just doesn't get it. Like, and I think I was already used to having conversations about my hair and the difference of expectation for textured hair versus straighter, maybe easier textures. But I look back on that now as an adult and as someone who has worked with children so much myself. And I'm just like, wow, she has no idea what that did. And just also, like, I think I started to think, oh, like, is the way that my mom does my hair, are the products that I use dirty? Like, why am I not as seen as clean as the other kids?
Yeah.
So that's an example of just like, woof, what is happening? What is the protocol to like, that cultural differences can lead teachers in even their best intentions to make a really intense jump because they don't understand other experiences, or maybe there's not enough diversity in their own life so that they can think like, oh, there's a lot of other things that could be at play here, not just this child is in danger.
Yeah. We talk a lot in educational spaces about culturally responsive pedagogy, culturally responsive teaching. And I think that some educators can leave with the understanding that it's about taking the curriculum, making sure it speaks to the students in my room. But I think sometimes they forget that before you can truly understand the curriculum, you need to understand the child that's in front of you. Right? They come with a set of experiences. They come with a set of genius that you can tap into. But if success, knowledge, if intelligence, if the ways in which students show up are riddled with our understandings of whiteness, right? If that dominates how we see students, then what you're talking about, what both of you are talking about, continuously come up. We'll minimize, parts of our students, especially for those who are mixed race, right? And we won't see, we'll we'll ask, are you okay when you have product in your hair? Like, it's there's so much there that I think, and I hope that every educator who's listening will take that with them. It's like, am I truly learning my students? Like, we're in the fourth marking period now in schools, like we're almost
Mm.
at the finish line. And if all you did was teach the curriculum, but you never got to learn who your students are outside of those learning moments in your class, then I feel like we're doing a disservice. You know what I mean? Like, we're
Totally.
not
I think that's
creating
even
those
more
spaces.
important. Like,
Yes.
honestly, it's more important than the curriculum. Because do I remember all the things that I learned in school? Not a bit. Like the Pythagorean theorem, like what, But but I'll tell you what I do remember is those teachers that like really gave me an experience, that really taught me things about myself and life, and like those are the things that like really form kids. I think it's way more important than the actual knowledge we're learning.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, as a math teacher, ugh,
Yeah, I'm a math major. I have a degree in math, so I fully have gone like I've learned all the things in math, and yet still, what was most important was the
there it is.
interactions. Okay, so I'm
There
Yes,
with
it
you
is.
Jazmine
fully.
gets her math on. Jazmine gets
Yeah.
her math. But
Oh
everybody
yeah.
can miss me with the math.
No, that's it. No, we're not math people. No. Okay.
Jasmine, yes.
Yes, you
Myself,
not
woo.
so much.
But you know what, Bobby? I will say, to Jasmine's point, and to the point both of you are making, how I did in a lot of my classes depended on the teacher. Like,
Yeah.
I had some math classes where I did so much better because I felt like, because I had a hard time. I have this thing, I've told Jasmine about this, where I almost feel like I'm an emotional learner. So I really had to feel
Mm,
connected to my teachers. I sat in the front, I felt like I needed eye contact from my teacher. I felt like I needed them to notice when I was struggling but still trying. Like, there were all these things going on, that the teachers that like really were paying attention and deeply listening to not just me but all the students, like, that just, it totally transformed what I was able to take in, because school is an escape for so many kids, especially
yeah.
kids of color. And I
Yeah.
think, I mean, what a mighty task that we're putting on teachers, but I do think it's true.
You know, um, I'm gonna definitely take that and sit with that. What you just shared about being an emotional learner. I think there's so many kids that I encounter every day that maybe don't have the language to say what you just said.
Mm.
For them, they'll say, "I don't like them." What they're
Mm.
trying to express, though, is there's something off about our connection, and it makes it hard for me to learn. Right?
Mm.
Yep.
They don't have the words for that yet. I'm teaching middle schoolers. They're 5-year-olds in big bodies. That's what they are. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
what they are. As much as I love them, if they ever hear this, I love you. Um,
Look, middle school's a weird time for all of us. It's a transition period. It really is. That's such a crucial transition period. I'll say like most of my like most traumatic experiences happened in middle. It's such a forming years. So that's
yeah,
I love hearing that that's what you teach, because I think doing the work that you do and the insight and what you're trying to provide, that's so important in those years. Like, it is a make or break moment almost.
and so in middle school, when you are trying to build up the social capital, it's like number one. Like,
Yep.
especially for seventh graders. I'm the APO for seventh grade, and it's like they kind of reclaim their mind in eighth grade, but in seventh grade, oh no,
Yeah.
oh no. And so identity, belonging, all of the things, especially as they're struggling with who they are, there's so much going on, right? And so, being that it's such a crucial point, and being that there's so much going on behind the scenes, if you will. When you think back to your middle school experience, particularly along the lines of uh, the unwritten rules of beauty standards, right? Um, I think, let me frame it this way. I think about, growing up and listening to and being all about, hip hop and and the messages even in hip hop said so. They didn't have to say it in their lyrics, even though they did. They said it with who they put out front
Mm-hmm.
and what was acceptable, right? And so then I walk into schools and, as I'm going through my schooling experience, and there was always this tension for, you know, do you like this kind of girl? Do you like that kind of girl? And I'm like for me, it's not that deep. I just thought she was cute, right? Like,
Yeah.
what are we doing, right? Um, so talk to me about that because some of my educators who may be listening may not even be clued in on the aspects of acceptance and belonging and how that relates to the unwritten rules of beauty standards, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, it's funny because I really remember between elementary school and middle school there was a drastic change. Like I
Hmm.
remember, and I grew up in a pretty like strict household, so I wasn't really like hanging out like outside of school with a lot of people. So I remember over the summer it was almost like I felt that everyone had gotten this like rule book on like what you're supposed to look like, how you're supposed to talk, like, and I missed it. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, this is brand new rules. I figured out the rules at in elementary school, and now there's a whole new set of rules, and I'm lost. Like I remember feeling that way. Like my friends that were my friends weren't my friends anymore. Like they had
Mm.
their own little thing, and I just remember thinking, oh no, I need to figure out this new landscape. What's cool? What am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to look like? And I went through a lot of phases, but I think some of the things that really impacted me was my hair. I wanted to straighten my hair. My mom would not let me straighten my hair. I begged her to let me straighten my hair because no one else had, like Meg said, we grew up in a pretty predominantly white suburban neighborhood, and it was like I need to somehow fit in, and so I wanted to straighten my hair, and I couldn't, and it was like devastating to me that I had to have this frizzy hair and look different than everyone. My skin tone too, like in the summer, I get really dark and I would literally try to avoid the sun because of those rap lyrics where it's light skin, red bone. It's also I need to be the right type of mixed person. They like the lighter skin
Mm.
mixed person. And so when I would get
Hmm.
really dark, it was a whole thing that I would feel like, oh shoot, now I'm really sticking out and I really don't fit in.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think it's such a intense thing to be so focused on your body and your appearance as a kid as you're also trying to learn and educate be educated and like grow, and you're also so hyper focused on like every day I'm thinking, how do I look, how am I appearing to other people, which then you just completely lose yourself. You're totally just catering to whatever the trend is, and the trends always change. And so especially for mixed people, and it's always like
Mm.
we want mixed people to be this way and talk this way and claim this thing, and then all of a sudden it's nope, now mixed people, we need this from you, and this is the way you need to behave and what you need to claim. And so it's like whiplash, honestly, with the trends. And
Wow.
so that's kind of, we call it the mixed existential crisis of like when you're like, okay,
Mm.
wait, I've been trying to cater my identity to everybody else, like who actually am I? How actually do I want to do my hair? How do I actually
Yeah.
feel about my skin? Not
Yeah.
what y'all are telling me, but how do I actually feel about these things?
It is
Megan,
so
anything
good.
you want to add to that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it was just really, really difficult to feel confident actually. I think for me, my experience was, and it all is like, so vulnerable to share even now, but I will because
Mm.
I think it's important. I think I look back and I do think I was witnessing some of my mom's own internalized racism or self hate that I don't want it to sound like I'm blaming my mother. I think it makes so much sense to me why any Black woman might internalize self-hate, and that can manifest with not finding yourself beautiful and
Yeah.
having an ideal that is so ridiculous, and the way that we treat Black women in this country is so disgusting. And so I think what I was witnessing was my mom, who is a stunningly beautiful woman, never actually recognized her beauty. And yet, she did a lot to be beautiful. She, was great with her hair. She was like such a fashionista and all these things, and all those things I picked up on. But I think what I was taking in was like armor, like beauty is armor, my
Yes.
hair, the way I dress, my makeup. And so I think I armored myself. And I think what I thought was like, I'm going to be as beautiful as I can despite my Blackness. And I feel like that is
Mhm.
what I was taking in. Like Black, like, and I was witnessing it in real time too. Like, girls who I were my peers, who I thought were gorgeous and awesome, never getting chosen by the boys first, just simply never. And that being like, oh, she's doing the best she can despite her Blackness. She's never going to be seen as the most beautiful because at least and this is my lens in Nevada, when Jazz and I were growing up, it was like white blonde girls, that is the
Mhm.
vibe, and except the Black boys found me attractive. The white boys did not, for the most part. Some of them did, but they made me feel like I wasn't good enough. Again, it felt like despite my, like this
Wow.
white boy likes me despite my Blackness. But
Mm-hmm.
the Black boys, or really any boy of color, tended to like me, and oftentimes more than a darker skinned girl. And that was clear to me. I understood that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I don't know where I put it or how I dealt with it. It made me feel confused and like upset, because to me Black women are the pinnacle of beauty, because I did not internalize that in the same way that my mother did for herself. So I saw my mom to be like peak.
Yeah.
So it confused me, I think, as a child and even as a teen, to realize that the world isn't recognizing the beauty that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Um, so I felt like I had something to prove with white people, that I had to be beautiful despite my Blackness. And then I felt put on a pedestal in some ways by the Black community because of my lighter skin. And that's something that I didn't want, and that, I'm going a little deeper here, but I actually think that has made it so that I sometimes walk on eggshells around Black people and Black women,
Mm.
because I am so aware of how real colorism is, that I don't want to perpetuate it. And I don't want them to think that I'm happy with, you know what I mean? Like being chosen because of my lighter skin. So it's a loaded and complex thing. But again, bringing it back to being a child, it's so confusing. It's so confusing.
Yeah. So I think in pictures a lot, right? It's just kind of how my brain works. And one of the things that that makes me think of is that feeling of when people are choosing, whether it be at PE, their teams, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
we're doing something, whether it be kickball or whatever. I got this one. I got that one. The most athletic always gets chosen first, right? So it's always that person. And then it kind of goes down the list, and you hated to be the last person chosen.
Yeah.
if you're still standing there while everyone else is chosen, you know you were not wanted. You're just allowed to be here,
Oh,
right? And I feel like for our educators who may be listening, for our mixed race audience who may be listening, for our Black people of color audience that may be listening, they know intricately the feeling of I wasn't picked.
mhm.
Everybody else was. And what that can do for us is make us turn our attention to other victims of racism, prejudice, colorism, and the like, and not necessarily look at the system that has done it to us all. And so now I'm mad at the lighter skinned woman because she got chosen. Meanwhile, all of us been messed up by this whole system to begin with. Does that make sense?
Oh, let's
Yes.
speak on it. I'm like, take me to church. Like, seriously. Oh my God. Yeah. Like, we're over here fighting each other and they're loving it because you know what? That means that we're getting more divisive. We're not coming together and realizing, wait, the problem isn't with one another. It's with this system that's setting us up against each other, especially for women too. It's like they really put us in competition and
Yeah.
really try to have us like, well, we like this feature right now, and that's what we're going for. But it's like, but wait, I don't, and it doesn't feel good, mind you. Like we said, to be fetishized, ugh, it's not a good feeling. You're not authentically being desired, so it's not like it's not something. Yeah, both sides of the coin. It's not a good experience. Period. And so when we do turn to each other and like blame one another, I think it's so divisive when really we need to be turning to like, wait, why are the beauty standards this way, and how can we fix them together?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when, like, one, those beauty standards aren't made for us. And
Mhm.
two, we're so much more dope than the beauty standards are setting us up for, right? Like,
Right.
what?
That part. That
That
part.
part. There's so much beauty
And
and diversity, you know?
Yes,
I
absolutely.
mean, and are the beauty like and sometimes the beauty standards are literally stolen from us and just whitewashed. It's like I'm over it.
Right.
I'm over it.
It is the worst because it is like this, and it happens in academia. It happens with beauty standards, intelligence, so many different ways. It's like this redlining effect where you told us that our beauty was not worth anything.
Mhm.
You devalued it to the point where now we moved out and went to the suburbs, right? The metaphorical suburbs. And then you raised the price where we are, and now you're saying it's worth something. Hold on. I had that first. You can't even
Whew.
do it like me.
Right.
It is yeah, man.
That part.
That part.
That part.
The so I wanna ask y'all, I'm really interested. If you had to sit down, you both, where you are now, the lenses you have now, all the learning that you've done, your work as specialist in this regard, and you had to sit down with your teachers in your experience, right? If you had to sit down with a school, let's just say, and they were saying to you, hey, help us with our understanding of creating a culture of belonging for mixed race students, what would be some of the first things you would tell them? Like, you need to make sure that if you do nothing else, do this. What would be some of those things?
Um I know you have thoughts, Jazz. We'll tag team this one. I would say get trauma informed.
Hmm.
Trauma informed training is very available right now. There's so many opportunities to do it. I think it is such a huge thing that teachers, I really wish it was something that had to be done every year,
Yeah.
because it really, it is so expansive. It tells us just the facts about what the body is going through
Hmm.
when one is triggered, and what the nervous system is going through, literally what parts of the brain a person it has the ability to access when they are scared or upset or triggered. And when you realize that, I think it opens up so many other conversations, and you learn how to be with someone when they're having a moment, how to what it actually means to be a safe space. The classroom needs to be a safe space.
Yeah.
And I think that is step one. I think the other thing I would say is maybe a little outside the box. But I think always point the finger back at thyself. I think it's like, where am I at as a human being with like diversity and inclusion? Where am I at on my understanding of our racial history in America? Like, what do I actually understand? And we all have a lot to learn, no matter where we're at. We can all educate ourselves much more. I know that is for sure the case for myself. But having some actual understanding. And third, I would say affinity groups. Affinity groups are an amazing space. It's really important that all people, no matter where they're coming from, have a group that is prioritizing them so that they can feel heard and seen and safe, so that they can actually express what's really going on for them. Because in school, there's so many hierarchies. There's the power dynamics that children are very aware of and very influenced by, of course. And so affinity groups are a great way for kids to be able to actually talk about what's happening based on who they are. And it'll help them build community if they're struggling otherwise, which often multiracial kids are.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah, I love those. I love this question because we're actually working with a school district right now. And we are running a program with the administrators and teachers. And in that program, we teach three philosophies, which is autonomy, exploration, and honor. And I think those are such a great foundation for diversity. It's like the autonomy is teaching kids that they have autonomy over their body, over their identity, over the words they use, over their stories. It really starting to cultivate that curiousness in kids and in teachers of like, be curious, no assumptions, leave your assumptions out the door, and ask people what their experience is. Ask people how they want to identify, how they want to express themselves, instead of putting them in a box and saying, now this is who you are, this is the box you're in, you need to express this way, claim these things, say these words, And so that autonomy piece, I think, is huge. And just like cultivating that in kids early on is so important. Like, you own your body. No one else owns your body and your identity. And then that exploration piece is, again, with this curiosity of like exploring the different parts of our identity. And I think this works for mixed and non-mixed people alike, because also, like Black is not a monolith, right? Like, there's also all these different experiences that just make up a person, and we're not all the same. Even if we do have the same background and races, we all experience really different things. So I think having a sense of exploration in the classroom of our identities and who we are in our cultures. And then that third philosophy is honor, which is like releasing any shame about who you are. There can be shame about some of the things that make up our identity or the races that we come from because of this conditioning of, white supremacy and racism. And so that honor piece, I think, is so important, of like honoring our differences. We are all different and we're all unique, and that's awesome and that's beautiful, and honoring that instead of feeling like it's something we have to hide. So I think having those three things be like a foundation of just the way that you're operating in the classroom it changes everything. It does make it just a more safe space.
One of the pillars of Liberation Lab is the first one is learn. And really, I mean unlearn, right? Like, do I hold my knowledge with an open hand? Because I think you're not willing to learn what you think you already know.
Oof.
And so we have a bunch of people in educational spaces that have been doing it for X amount of years, and they've seen levels of success, particularly if they've gone through like traditional sit down, be seen, not heard schooling, right? And if they've experienced levels of success in that type of school, they want to create that same experience for students today And students today ain't having that.
No.
That's not what they're about, right? And I say that to say, if we're not willing to unlearn what we think we know about identity, what we know about even just control in the classroom, what does that even mean? Um, then we get situations where people feel like being trauma sensitive is really being weak,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all about power and domination, which we know where that comes from, right?
Right.
um, so if you could go back in time and you're sitting down with little Megan and little Jazmine, and they're about to go straight into that tumultuous time of middle school, and you could just offer a tidbit of advice, what would you tell yourself before you step into this? I don't know if it was sixth grade for you or seventh grade, but like before you walked into that building where everything's changing, what would you tell yourself?
You're in charge. Like that autonomy piece, I think is so huge. Like my adult life has been reclaiming the power over my body, my identity. I had to give that up. So I think, yeah, just like you're in charge, you get to question everything. You're allowed to question everything, and you get to decide for you what feels good for you.
This is such a great question. It's something like take a breath
Mm-hmm.
and speak from that authentic place. Like take a moment if you have to tap into what's real for you. I think I did a lot of jumping outside of myself to make other people comfortable and happy. So I think it's like Megan, be in your own body. Like trust what you're actually feeling and experiencing. Because it can be hard. That is some peak level imposter syndrome. That's some peak
Yeah.
level I want to please. So I think it's like you have everything you need. You are unique, and maybe also I am unique and interesting rather than like I'm a weirdo. Like nobody understands me. Like
Yeah.
I'm unique. I'm fascinating, and just let my authenticity bleed through.
You know, part of the piece about creating that culture of belonging is the ways in which we can empower and affirm who our students are, right? If we truly understand how our society has been set up and the effect it has on so many, then we're going to create spaces in which people can walk into who they are and the fullness of who they are and affirm that. And I
Mm-hmm.
hope that our educators hear that from both of you, and how you shared so vulnerably and powerfully in this time we've shared. But I want them to be able to connect with the work that you're doing, to continue this journey of learning and unlearning, like I talk about. And so, if folks wanted to tap into things that you're doing, support your work, anything that they can do, how can they touch base with both of you?
Yeah. Yeah. So our website is mixedinamerica.org. You can find our current offerings there and just a bit about the mixed experience on there too. If you're not mixed or you have mixed kids too, we have a lot of parents in our community who are trying to educate and understand that experience, which is really important. And we're on Instagram at mixed_in_America. Yeah, and we have so many resources, free resources for people on our Instagram. We have a free workbook for mixed people to begin working through these mixed identity wounds. And we offer, of course, like one-on-one mentorships and coaching programs and group programs. So there's a lot of ways to plug into the community if you are mixed or you want to learn about the mixed experience or you have mixed kids. Like, please, the more the merrier. We need community.
And we love teachers.
And we
We
love
really
teachers. Yeah, we
like
work
I
with a
would
lot of teachers.
yeah, I would say like we work with so many teachers and therapists
Yeah.
because I think people are trying to expand the focus of what it means to be mixed and how to create a safe space for specific people. So yeah, don't be shy. We love working with affinity groups too to help like really even get more narrow, and help like really dig up some deep conversations. So just throwing it out there that we love to touch base and meet other folks that are doing the work. I
Yeah.
love what you said, Bobby, about an open hand and like, yeah, giving someone give myself permission to unlearn. That's
Yeah.
actually really freeing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so powerful.
I think, well, one, I want to encourage all our listeners, please tap into the work that these fantastic humans are doing. Please tap into their Instagram. They go live with wonderful folks. I was just on the last live you had with, I'm blanking on her name, but she was from NPR.
Yeah,
And y'all were talking.
Marielle. Yeah, from
Yeah,
NPR.
yeah. Such a fascinating and just wonderful conversations. I was just vibing with it all because, again, like I said, coming from a Panamanian background, like there was, you would think I came home and, the cuisine was, primarily soul food. It wasn't. We had rice with everything. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes, yeah. Yeah, that's
so,
a whole experience too, to have like that your like internal identity is different than your external identity. Like you get it.
yeah,
We
yeah.
do. We really
You
get
get
that.
it.
And so bringing those conversations to light, helping people to see themselves clearly, to give themselves permission to, oh, I'm not crazy. You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I like all of those things. I just want to commend the work that you're doing. Let you know I'm continuing to glean and learn from both of you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for what you're doing. And man, just keep going because it's needed.
Oh, thank you so much, Bobby. Wow.
Yeah, and thank you for your work. I think it's such, so important work, like the school system, and I think we can talk about and have these conversations all day long, but like we really got to get into these systems and change that, because that otherwise we're just going to keep perpetuating the same thing and having to all these generations are going to have to keep unlearning the same things because the systems are teaching them the same things. So
The
I
same
think this
exact
work
thing.
is, yeah, it's huge to be able to actually make that long lasting change. So yeah, keep on doing your work as well. Like the feeling's so
Yeah.
mutual.
It's not easy, Bobby. Like, it's not
Yeah,
easy. Teacher of the teachers, and also, being in the system and being the person that's trying to actually make change for these tight, rigid systems is not
yeah.
easy. So, thank you truly for the work that you're doing, because
Appreciate you.
we need it.
This isn't the end. More collaboration in the future, I'm sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
And but for our audience, please don't let a moment pass by. Tap into what these ladies are doing, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, ladies.
Thank
Hey.
you.